Good morning, good Wednesday morning, and welcome to Saving America with Dr. David Schein, author of The Decline of America. David is a great, he's got a lot of experience with, telling the news, all of the things that he does. And David is, besides an author, he is a professor and dean, right? You're a dean at the university.
Associate dean for graduate programs, in addition to being a professor. Yes.
At the University of St. Thomas here in Houston, which is where we're located, Houston, Texas. He also has a company, Claremont Management Group, where he is a consultant for small businesses. He's an attorney. So, David, what do you do in your spare time?
There's very little spare time left these days. I always tell people if I had a little bit more time, I'd work out more, because I do value staying healthy, and that's my big alternative to being on the computer.
Got it. And it does feel good sometimes to move around instead of just
absolutely.
Computer. So, David, we're going to talk about our first segment is In the News.
You say A, and that's your final answer?
And what do you have for us this morning that's in the news?
We had a pretty interesting thing. Bob Woodward apparently was given an opportunity to do a reported 18 short interviews with President Trump over some time period. I never heard about it. Apparently it was done undercover, and it doesn't sound like it was monitored very well. Most people, and of course, especially Joe Biden right now, you can't get close to Joe Biden. You cannot ask him a question unless it goes through his handlers, because they're so afraid that he's going to foul up. So Trump apparently had these freewheeling discussions with Bob Woodward. Woodward himself, he and Carl Bernstein, of course, had a gigantic impact on the United States in 1972-73 with their book called All the President's Men. And they got lucky. There were a couple of young reporters at the time. They're not young anymore. But at the time, a source came to them, an inside source, who was never publicly confirmed, but we're pretty sure that we know who it is. That person, in fact, was in the news recently, I believe passed away. But in any event, that was Woodward's big claim to fame. It did directly lead to the resignation of Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon, in my book, the only president to get an F, clearly earned it. Republican president. And interestingly, Nixon actually had some real accomplishments prior to that. He opened relations with China. He signed OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, and he signed the Environmental Protection Act. So all of those brought to you by a Republican president in 1970 or so. But clearly, this scandal was one that brought him down. So I don't want to take anything away from Woodward and Bernstein at that point. But in terms of Woodward today, I think his ship has sailed, as they say, and there really hasn't been much reason for anybody to talk to him. So he's written what has come off as a fairly inflammatory book. And the piece that people have in the news over this last week is that Trump admitted to Woodward that he played down the impact of COVID-19. And people are saying, well, he didn't take it seriously. But Trump was quite clear in what he said. And that's the part that's not being picked up, in the news. And that is that he said, I don't want to drive people to panic. We've got a lot of professional health people. And in fact, what didn't get as much press was immediately after this hit the press, they had Tony Fauci, Dr. Fauci, the epidemiologist, who came out and said Trump did everything we told him to do. He never contradicted good medical advice. Unfortunately, the medical advice was flawed. Why was it flawed? Because since Woodrow Wilson with the Spanish flu in 1918, 1919, we have not had a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic, and people don't know, number one, what the heck to do with it. Number two, we're a very globally interconnected economy. And number three, this virus is a little bit different. It is very easy to contract. And unfortunately, when you contract it, it can have very severe symptoms, much more severe than what we call the seasonal flu. But in terms of how significant the book is and things like that, I do not consider the book relevant. I do not consider the book of particular interest, and certainly don't care about this statement that Trump made, because his actions speak louder than words. And he was late blocking traffic from China, but he did it earlier than, and in fact, at the time he blocked traffic from China, a lot of Democrats booed him for that, saying that he was being xenophobic or something like that. So it's rather ironic that they're now coming back and saying da 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 da.
And that it happens that way quite often.
Oh yeah.
So that's in the news, and believe me, it's on every television station there is. Fox, NBC, all of them were just carrying information about Bob Woodward and his book Raid. So that's all in the news, and thank you for your assessment. So let's go now to the rumors.
Well, the weakest link. Goodbye.
So this week, the rumor is that if Biden had been president when the pandemic started, that it would have been handled much better than with Trump. So that's the big rumor going around right now. So what is your feedback and your comments on that?
Well, it dovetails nicely with our discussion of the Woodward book and the piece that the media has jumped on. And I find it humorous because, Biden, Obama were in office for 8 years. Their distinguishing feature was that in 8 years, they had the slowest recovery in American history. And so the fact that anybody thinks that Biden can do something better is rather peculiar and unsubstantiated. Biden's been in public life for over 40 years. I can't think of a single accomplishment of Biden's in over 40 years of sucking money off the public payroll. And and certainly he is the type of politician that marked my book as The Decline of America, even though he hasn't been president. He's been vice president, but he fits the target of my next book, which is still in development, but we're trying to accelerate development, which talks about what a waste that we have in the Congress and the Senate of the United States. And Biden, again, is Exhibit A, as somebody who's been in office for a long time and has increased their personal wealth and increased the wealth of their family, but have not really accomplished much for the American public. So I think, as I said a minute ago, Dr. Fauci is the expert on COVID-19, and the medical team that was put together, they have done the best that they could in a moving target because they didn't know this was as dangerous as it was at the beginning. They then went through this terrible 90-day shutdown. Consensus of just about everybody that has any sense is it didn't work. It was the wrong thing to do. And we've now hit a very sad milestone. I've heard unofficially that we may have had 200,000 COVID-19 deaths in the United States. Indeed, a very sad number. I do want to quickly add that number does not mean that people died from COVID-19. It means when they did die, they were considered positive or may have been considered positive for COVID-19. My personal opinion is the number is overstated in terms of people who actually were a fatality because they had COVID-19, a direct causal effect. So, but it's a very serious situation. And I think the fact that they're hiding, but Biden's handlers are hiding him in the basement instead of letting him out run around in his apparently low energy level, I can't conceive of how he could possibly have done a better job than Trump did. Again, we're not saying that Trump and the American government did a great job. We're just saying it's unthinkable that a government under the leadership of Biden would have done any better, or Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer and the other loudmouths who run around and say they know how to do it, usually the week after something else changed and Trump's already done it. So anyway, but that's in terms of rumors.
Yes, absolutely. And the rumors are flying off the shelf, as they say these days. So, so we're going to close this week's podcast with just the facts.
Just the facts, ma'am.
And one of the things that has been very much in the news over the last few, actually months, I'm sure, has been the poverty, the war on poverty. So what are the facts about that, David?
Well, it is an extremely sad story, and it's one that I do highlight in my book. Remember, in the middle of my book, I feature the 17 presidents of the United States, Wilson through Obama, and then I do some analysis of the economics and the marketing and the different things that we did. And one of the things that I specifically talk about is that America has lost the war on poverty. And we've spent an extraordinary amount of money. In my book, I estimate that up until the time we finished the book in 2017, that we had spent $10 trillion, $10 trillion on the war on poverty. And we don't have much to show for it. And again, that's an indictment of the system that was put in place. It's an indictment of the American government and its failure of bureaucracy. It's not an indictment of individual government employees, but it's an indictment of the government employee system. And it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how you move people forward. Some of the experiments that have failed included building massive urban housing projects that turned into gang activity and drug distribution centers. Didn't work. Forced school segregation succeeded in moving white families into private schools and out into even more distant suburbs, contributing to urban sprawl. Instead of improving the urban schools, we messed with the system and we made it even worse. And we also have failed to focus on the individual. I think some of the current problems that we have is that we are not understanding what our social challenges are. African Americans in the United States are not the largest minority. The Hispanic population is double the Black population in the United States. And yet it seems that a lot of what we do is focused on our Black population. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it's not a very effective approach. It doesn't fully comprehend the broad needs of our society and what we need to focus on. So I think we need to reimagine and rethink the war on poverty and to refocus it. And I want to underscore something that I also talk about in my book. One of the reasons that America is the great success that it has been, and certainly not due to our dysfunctional government, but due to the diversity and the hard work of our people. Historically, Americans work more days in the year than any other developed economy. We actually are hardworking people. And it doesn't matter what we make, Americans tend to work a lot. and to do a lot, and also are very generous people. America continues to give money to different societies all over the world, even though we're struggling with an enormous public debt. So I think it's not an issue of spending more money. We need to spend the money a lot smarter, and we need to refocus on each individual instead of saying, well, let's put you all in a box somewhere and we're going to tell you how we're going to do things for you. And so I think that moving forward, we need to have a better system of things, needs to be more inclusive of all races. And by the way, in the state of Texas, latest population statistics, the Hispanic population, Black population, Asian population combined, it easily exceeds the white population. So Caucasians are not the majority. And people may say, oh, well, they still control a lot of the money and all that. That may be true, but the point is that the trend lines are certainly quite different. And we are definitely having a multicultural and a multicolor America. And I think if we can move forward with that more inclusive approach, hopefully, and straighten out our dysfunctional government, I think we'll make progress.
But did you add like the people that have immigrated here from other countries? Like, I think we have a huge Indian population, or at least getting to have a significant number of people from India and other countries, other either European or Asian or African countries. So do you have any idea how that plays into the numbers?
Well, I have a couple of observations on that. First of all, I am a huge fan of immigration. I think immigration, America, the best example we have is our friends in Japan. Japan is a country that is depopulating. It's become a very wealthy country. Wealthy people, quite bluntly, have fewer children. They are not replacing themselves. In order to replace yourself, a couple needs to get married and to have 2.2 children, because there are fatalities. There are people who won't marry and reproduce. So you need something like that. Of course, that's my favorite joke, my 2.2 children and my 1.5 dogs and, stuff like that. So the point is, though, is that the United States is getting very close to depopulating. If we did not have the fertility rate of our Hispanic, not our African American, but our Hispanic population, one of the reasons they are such a rapidly growing minority is their fertility rate is still quite high. And so they are helping to keep the population at least kind of level. But for us to continue to be a leader for the next 100 years, we need the best minds to come to the United States. So I am not in favor of open borders. Open borders lead to drugs, lead to terrorists, lead to people who come here to sponge off the public system. That's not how we advance our country. That's not a racist statement. That's just an objective statement. We can't take in the whole world. But what we should be doing, and this is where President Trump and I disagree strongly, we should be taking in the people from all over the world who have something to bring to the United States. And we must have those. I would be in favor of us bringing in at least 1 million new people every year who have education, who want to come here for college and then stay, want to come here for grad school and then stay. I think we could dramatically advance our society and again become the leaders in engineering and technology and medicine, because we won't maintain those leads if we don't do that.
That's great. I love that. And I know we're not talking about that topic today, but when you were just talking about the numbers of the different groups. So we'll have to save more discussion on immigration for another segment of Saving America, the decline of America. We will be referring to it from time to time because it is a great research guide, and David did a lot of research to put this book together. So it's all compiled for you. If you want to compare our current president, with anyone back to Woodrow Wilson. How each one of them, how did Woodrow Wilson handle a pandemic? Because there was one in his day, right, David?
That was the Spanish flu. Correct, Sandy. Thanks.
Okay, so get this book and get it now before the election so you can do some research. So go get that today. And David, another great show. Oh my gosh, so much to talk about, and you are so. I mean, you have so many different, varied in the topics that you can discuss, and you do discuss, and a lot of information. So I love talking to you. It's very informative to me, and also to the people who are listening to us right now as we live stream on Facebook, but also in the podcast, Saving America. So thank you, David Schein.
Thank you very much, Sandy. Take care. Have a great week.